We're good.
Thank you. It is 5 p.m. This is Councilor Bill Solms, and I'm calling this regular meeting of the Ledyard Town Council Finance Committee to order. President are myself, Councilor Ingalls, member of the committee. I think we're still waiting for Tim Ryan. Also, we have Mike. Pardon me?
Tim is on.
Oh, okay. So Tim Ryan is also present.
Well, I saw him come in, but now
he'll get here.
Okay.
So also we have Mike Bronner, Finance Committee from the Board of Ed, Mayor Allen, Jen Muggio, Jim Butler from Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments. Jen, you're from Ledge Light?
From Ledge Light Health District.
Yep, thank you. Council Chairman Linda Davis, Superintendent Jay Hartling, and Business Manager for the Board of Ed, Rachel Mosier, and Finance Director Marcia Hancock for the town. And I see we have Tim Ryan now. So
yep, I'm sorry, I was a little late.
That's okay, not to worry, Tim. Okay, so I will ask for citizens' comments if there are any. And hearing none, we have in the agenda, we have a lot of information about potential projects for ARPA funding. And if you haven't seen that, it'd be good to take a look at it, and we'll be discussing that this evening. Other than that, I would accept a motion for review and approval of the September 1 meeting minutes.
So moved. Councilor Ryan.
Andre, you're mute. There you go.
Second, Councilor Ingalls.
Thank you. Any
That's
corrections, comments?
No.
No. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Councilor Ingalls votes aye.
And Councilor Solms votes aye, and the motion passes. Thank you very much. So I'm going to skip over review and discussion on the fire apparatus because we don't have any new information, and we're going to do a field trip in October to visit the fire station. So we're going to move on to the second item, which is discussion regarding possible changes to the capital improvement plan and CNR based on ARPA funding. And so I would like to, at this point, turn it over to the mayor because we have two guests to talk about their request for Ledyard's funding. So Mayor, would you like to introduce?
Yes, thank you, Councilor Solms. So we have 3 requests which were in the spreadsheet that I sent titled ARPA funded project options for the Finance Committee and for the Town Council to take under consideration and review. Those 3 come from the Southeastern Connecticut Cultural Coalition, the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments, and Ledge Light Health District. And so I have reached out to both Steve Mansfield, who is away right now, but Jen is capably filling in for him, and Jim Butler, who is the executive director of the COG, to give us, or give you, I should say, a 5 to 7 minute overview of what it is that that they're seeking to do with the portion of the ARPA funds that should the Finance Committee and the Council approve, how they would expend those funds and how it would benefit the town of Ledyard and the region. So with that, I think the way the agenda reads, we'll start with the Council of Governments and Jim Butler, and then we'll move over to Jen right after that. So Jim, if you would jump in.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chairman Solms, for having me today, and councilors, I appreciate it. As you probably know, Ledyard is one of 22 member municipalities of the Council of Governments, which is currently chaired by Mayor Allen. Back in June, I prepared a memorandum for our executive committee, which Mayor Allen also chairs, that took a recommendation made by one of our municipal managers, put some flesh on the bones, if you will, and recommended to the executive committee and ultimately the Council of Governments that a small percentage of your ARPA county funds, not your total county ARPA funds, but your county funds, be dedicated to the Council of Governments as a voluntary assessment for the purpose of retaining a regional recovery coordinator. I will go back to what the regional recovery coordinator would do in a minute. I just want to, in case you don't know, explain how funding, as I understand it, is working from the federal government. You're receiving two tranches or two different years. You're going to be funded your full amount. Ledyard is slated to receive a total of $1.487 million, give or take. Your county portion of those funds is, you probably know this right at the tip of your tongue. Your municipal allocation is 1.487 million. You're also receiving 2.839 plus million in county funds for a grand total of $4.327 million. I've provided the mayor with a table that I'm looking at, which was what was provided to us by state OPM at the time we put this memo together back in June. I know the numbers have shifted just a little. The county allocation was provided to Connecticut by the Department of Treasury due to the fact that we don't have counties here in Connecticut. Many of our municipalities, our COGS and CCM lobbied on behalf of our municipalities and convinced the federal government that we would be shortchanged here in Connecticut due to our absence of county government. We're one of only 2 states that don't have county form of government anymore. Recently, the Bureau of Census, has recognized councils of government in Connecticut as county equivalents. So that's going to allow us in the future to be eligible for a lot more federal grants than we previously were. In any event, that did bolster all of our municipal allocations under this program. We're asking for, as I mentioned, 1% of your total county allocation for a total of $28,399. And we're asking for it over a 4-year period at 0.25% per year. Currently, Ledyard contributes on an annual basis per a formula, which is in state statute. It's population based, a total of $8,278. That's in your annual COG dues. And that number hasn't changed, Mayor Allen, what, 7, 8, 9 years?
Yeah, it's held steady.
Changed in 10 years. We have the lowest per capita dues assessed of any COG in the state. So we're leveraging a lot of federal and state monies using your local monies to provide you programs. And I'm happy to tell anybody what the COG does if you need more detail. Your voluntary assessment, should you agree to this, would be an additional $7,099. Okay, $7,099.89. Now, what does that get you? I was asked by a counselor in another town, what will we get for that $7,000? Well, I talked a little bit about what we did over the last 18 months with our current staff, and that's primarily myself and Deputy Director Amanda Kennedy. We staffed a regional recovery steering committee that the state had all of the COGs stand up in 3 subcommittees of that group to talk about unmet needs. Right from the get-go in the pandemic, we worked with Jen, Steve, and Ledyard Health District, Uncas Health District, and one other health district that has a town or 2 in our region. And we held or hosted weekly COVID calls with all the chief elected officials in the 2 tribal nations and the Submarine Base and Coast Guard Academy that have non-voting seats on the COG to share information about COVID response and recovery. I even went so far on behalf of the COG to follow up on an offer made, and we brokered a deal with a businessman in the United States who had a contact in China at a time when N95 masks were hard to get hold of, and we brought masks to 7 or 8 of our towns in the Southeast Area Transit District. That included me making sure the masks got shipped when they left the port of New York after midnight, made sure they had a home here in southeastern Connecticut since I wouldn't have been at the COG office yet. Unfortunately, one of our fire departments stepped right up and we made sure those masks got distributed the very next day. So we've done a lot with the staff that we have, but we have other duties and responsibilities. We envision the Regional Recovery Coordinator taking a more active role in assisting our towns in grant reporting, budgeting. Actually, we were asked today at the Council of Governments monthly meeting could we assist one of our towns in looking at their ideas for ARPA use? We previously discussed that with one of our other chief elected officials. Not that we are the federal government. It's going to be up to each town to determine that you meet the criteria set forth in the American Rescue Plan Act. But we are here to help and to provide you ideas as what's going on in the rest of the country. I'd really like to have this position filled. We're going to continue to provide that service. I was asked what will happen if nobody contributes. Well, we're going to continue to help our COG. That's what we do. But it would allow us to do this a little bit in a lot more detail, a little bit less strain on the leadership of the COG, which is myself and Amanda, so we can continue to do the other work we do. The mayor mentioned 5 to 7 minutes. I'm probably right about that. I don't want to go over too much. I did provide Mayor Allen and all the other CEOs in the region as a follow-up to my original memo, which had a job description, a scope of work and responsibilities as to what the RRC position would do if and when we hired the position. So I just, one final note, all the towns have different ways of how you're approaching, how you're going to expend ARPA funds. I received word today from one of the CEOs in one of our smaller towns that he thinks they're going to approve of the dedication of funds to the COG, but he probably won't do that until they go to town meeting in January. Obviously, until I have a critical mass of funding, I've advised Chairman Allen and other COG members that we probably don't want to go out and fill a position on speculation that the others will come through. So the sooner we know we have a critical mass, we'll try to get the position filled with the right person and be ready to help. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Counselor Ingalls, Counselor Ryan, questions?
I do have one question on, unless Andra wants to go. All right.
Go ahead, Tim. We know what you're going to ask. Let
I
it
don't,
go.
so I'm waiting. I'm waiting.
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you for the presentation. There's a lot of great detail in there. I do think the position is value added. However, I do have a question about, you mentioned 4 years as the period in which you're asking for funds. And I'm just curious what happens after 4 years.
That's a great
question. Obviously the position, I'm assuming, isn't sunsetting. So,
well,
yeah.
Councilor Ryan, it actually could be sunsetted. In the job, we've already posted the job and we said it would be open. We gave a deadline, said it would be open to be filled, but we haven't contacted any of the applicants yet or begun any interviews for the reason I stated before. We stated right in the job announcement that it would be based on the availability of the funding. Because one, I wanted to make sure the person knew if there weren't, or the applicants knew if we got no funding, we're probably not going to fill a position. The COG Executive Committee has discussed with me the potential, if we receive a lot of the funding, but not all that we need, dedicating COG reserve funds or our fund balance funds to that, or combining it with one of our other funding sources, like our regional service grant from OPM. We potentially could fund a portion of that work out of that. And then the final, I guess, option would be to contract with somebody on a part-time basis based on the funds available. My thought right now would be, if in 4 years, we were able to hire somebody, full-time, part-time, doesn't matter, the funding goes away. If the COG doesn't have work for this person to do, that person would have been put on notice that well before, when they're hired, that again, their position is a short-term position, 4 years or less. We're actually looking at probably 3.5 years now, because the 4 years was tied to the deadline that towns were given by the federal government to expend the funds. So great question. We don't intend to hire a position and then I'm back here in 4 years and saying to you, hey, we still have this really nice person on board. They were a really, a great addition to our staff. We're coming back to ask for funding to do something else. That's not our plan. And your mayor, my chairman, will assure you of that. So thank you for the question.
All right. No, thank you very much for the information. So just to be clear about my understanding about what you said in just, the summary form, is that the job that you're posting for is being posted as a relatively short-term position. And it's contingent, obviously, upon the near-term availability of funding. hopefully getting the amount of funding you need from the other municipalities in the COG, but also on the long-term availability of funding. So after 4 years, this position is not a guaranteed position for the applicant or whoever gets the job if the job's offered. And it's understood that at the end of 4 years, it could be sunset.
That is correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I should point out, we currently have a full-time staff of 9 employees. We just hired our 9th employee. I think it's the largest number of folks that I've directed as executive director. I worked at the Council of Governments back in the early 80s as a senior planner. We had 18 or 19 people on staff, and that was based on the grant funds that were available. We've gotten lean and mean over the years. We've kept it that way on purpose. When we do have some grant programs that don't necessarily indicate we might have that grant program beyond a certain period of time, what we've done is hire consultants or contract with staff. Like there's a couple of planners working for us part-time, working in towns that needed a planner. Rather than bring on another full-time staff, we contracted with a retired planner to do that work for us. I'm pretty sure that's how the council wants us to operate, so that's what we've been doing. And we're not going to bring somebody into a position and guarantee them employment for life.
Yeah, no, and just so you're aware, this isn't a new concern of mine. That's why Bill was so upfront with. He knows what I'm going to ask, is because especially for this money. I mean, this isn't forever money. So I've tended to shy away from options that incur recurring expenses even after the funding is gone, because that's a new financial obligation that we may or may not want to take on long term. So that's just where my eye is at. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Councilor Ingalls?
I don't have any questions at this point. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Other councilors? Okay, everyone's on mute, so I'm assuming none. So I have no questions too. I have the same one Tim does. We always have that question. It's a good one, and thank you for that answer. And I also want to comment that the town of Ledyard really values the work that the COG does. The mayor tells us regularly at every council meeting, there's always something about something the COG has done for us or something we've gone to the COG to ask. And we find the work that you guys do extremely valuable. And I'm amazed that you've done it with literally half the staff you once had. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you, Councilor.
And we won't make a decision on this tonight. We have a number of items on our list, which is growing, but this is very helpful in helping us to understand the value of the proposition, and especially the fact that you're asking for a percentage of the county funds, given that we receive those funds since there is no county government. So very good point. Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Jen Muggio for Ledge Light Health District. Jen, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Chairman, and thanks for having me. I would like to share with you our breakdown of calculations for the ARPA funds and explain a little bit more and then answer any questions that you have. As you may or may not be aware, the federal funding streams that have come down related to COVID, first the CRF funds and now the ARPA funds, while designed to support a community's response to a public health emergency, did not include a direction of funding directly to regional health districts. And so we are presenting our request to each of our towns as your town's public health department that has been leading the response to this public health emergency. And while we recognize the title of this funding stream is about recovery, just reminding us all that we're still very much in the middle of the response to this public health emergency and the needs related to responding to cases in our communities, to mitigating the transmission of disease in our communities, and supporting our community members in protecting themselves, their families, and their neighbors remain constant. And if you are following the news, you understand I'm not feeling so well prepared for this meeting because I've been on calls all day related to outbreaks in different institutional settings. So we have requested 1% from each of our member municipalities of their total funding allocation, both their municipal and county allocation. And we recognize that each municipality is, as Mr. Butler said, going through your own process and looking at your allocations and how they might be spread out over the years. So we don't have any special requests or designs about receiving the full allocation all in the first year or having it spread out. We recognize that what works for one municipality may not be the best match for another municipality, and recognize that this is a voluntary request we're making, and appreciate that you have lots of requests to consider as you look at how to spend down this allocation. So the allocation requests, the 1% of the full amount, is just over $43,000. We have identified a number of needs that we're not able to support with our existing core budget, but certainly will enhance our response to COVID and also help us, quote unquote, recover from responding for the last 18 months. We've been managing to lead this public health response while also fulfilling our other statutory obligations. It's taken, as you can imagine, quite a toll on our staff and our resources. And this additional funding allocation will allow us to bolster our staff and take some of the pressure off so that staff members can get back to some of our other responsibilities, to our other planning activities, and also looking ahead. I don't think it's any secret that the public health workforce has really been taxed by this public health emergency, and not only at Ledge Light Health District, but across the state and nation. There are public health professionals who are looking into the near future and making decisions about retirement or pursuing a different career. And so this funding allocation provides us with an opportunity not only to relieve the pressure a bit, but to prepare for those staff transitions so that we can continue to provide the full range of public health services in a comprehensive and efficient way for our member municipalities. We have allocated some funding towards another public health nurse, and I will share with you that since we prepared this funding request, we have actually gone ahead and hired a fourth now public health nurse, and that is because the state has announced that they are dialing back their state contact tracers. For the last year or so, we've had our 2 primary contact tracers supporting our 2 public health nurses in doing the contact tracing, but we've had a lot of support from contact tracers who were contracted by the state of Connecticut to provide support to local health districts, and that support is ending. So we did need to fill that public health nurse position. It does put a crunch on our planning and our budgeting. The ARPA funding from each of the municipalities would take that crunch off and allow us to also then look at filling some needed positions in environmental health and other departments. We also need to expand our support of community members because, again, the state is ending their support, what they call the community resource coordinator contracts. And that was a system put in place to provide support for individuals who were required by CDC and DPH guidelines to either quarantine or isolate and might face hardships doing so. And so we need a additional community health worker who would be able to work with those families, identify their needs, connect them with resources in the community, and perhaps step into the gap if somebody needs a delivery of milk and eggs in order to stay home and prevent the transmission of disease to other people in the community. We've also identified infrastructure improvements, both in our building and with our vehicles and with our information technology systems that, again, we've been finding solutions for kind of on the fly through the pandemic. And those continue to be needs of ours, additional funding allocation would be helpful. We are going to need to continue to do mobile vaccination clinics. Right now, they're small scale in parks and farmers markets and settings like that. But we are going to be getting into the bigger mass vaccination clinics that we were doing earlier in 2021, where we're vaccinating 400 people in 2 hours, and vehicles to transport all of the supplies that are needed for those clinics are on our list, as well as information technology assets to allow us to connect seamlessly and immediately with the state and federal databases where we're required to record the number of doses given and inventory of vaccine and things like that. We've also identified, and this is allowed in a special category under the ARPA funding, support for mental health resources for our community, particularly behavioral health and substance use services, supplies and support for community members who are struggling in a really real way with the mental health impacts of isolation and grief associated with the pandemic. And then finally, we are operating over here without an emergency generator for our offices, and certainly have identified that. And if our offices go down, while we have lots of capacity to work in the field, there's needs here that can't be field-based, particularly around vaccine storage and maintaining temperatures. And every time there's been a storm, because we don't have an emergency generator, we're rushing around to transfer vaccine to another provider who could store it for us. And it's risk on both ends. I could go on with needs that we've identified that qualify under the ARPA funding allocations, but we kind of stopped there because we ran up to the 1% and a little bit over. But I hope you can see that we will be good stewards of the town's allocation.
Thank you, Jen. Councilors, Ryan and Ingalls, questions?
Hi, thank you, Jen. I appreciate the presentation. I have two questions. One is about the families. You mentioned, wait a minute, put my glasses on, that would help. Okay, families that might need to quarantine and experience a hardship doing so. How is that expected to continue to be a problem? How many families have Ledge Light served this way, since, February of 2020? I'd like to hear more about that.
Sure, and I'd be happy to get those data for you about the numbers. When we interview someone for contact tracing, if there's a screening that's done around their needs related to housing, employment, sometimes we have to write letters to their employers telling them that they're required to quarantine, things like that. Sometimes people lose income quarantining, and there's a gap in terms of a rent payment to keep them from being evicted, or a food delivery or something like that. Right now, we facilitate those needs by making a referral under the system set up by the state to the community resource coordinator. And that contract is held by TVCCA. Things you recognize that. So those contracts are ending. We're not going to have a system in place that's supported by the state after September 30th. So when someone identifies a need, we need to be able to respond, because not providing that support increases the likelihood that those folks are just not going to maintain their quarantine or isolation period, and going to be a risk in terms of community health. So I will have to go into the contact tracing database and see how many referrals, CRC referrals we've made, and get back to you with that number. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have definitely got some system design thinking to do on our end. We haven't put a lot of thought into it yet because we've been waiting for some clarification, both from the state and maybe some lessons learned from TDCCA,
Mm.
but also in terms of whether or not we will receive the full funding request from our municipalities. And if not, where do we adjust our budget and dial back on that particular line perhaps or not. But we would design a system so that, you know, there's kind of a qualification process. We know how people are becoming eligible for that kind of support. Obviously, we'll connect people with existing resources as much as possible. If there are other community agencies that could help with rent relief or food or something like that, we would take advantage of those existing resources first and foremost before we provided any direct relief. But direct relief and assistance of this type to support people in maintaining quarantine and isolation is one of the allowable activities included in the ARPA guidelines.
Okay. Very good. And my next question is, I don't even know how to ask sometimes I'm like, I have an idea of what I want to ask and I can't put it into words. Essentially my question is, how did you generate your list? Did you like sit down with staff and be like, okay, what are our biggest stressors over the last 18 months? You know, so, or is there do you have some sort of built-in procedure for generating ongoing needs, like we have a capital improvement plan. So we know when we encounter funds, these are the things that we've prioritized already. So my question is about how did you generate your list?
I think a little bit of both of those things. We did certainly talk with our team, particularly the team that's been most closely involved with the COVID response, about where we're feeling the crunch. The additional public health nurse is a great example because our existing team members who are working on contact tracing, immediately let us know they're at capacity. And the phones were ringing off the hook. The contact tracing system was alerting us to more and more cases, and we could not keep up with the floodgates, and that was even with the support from the state. So that was certainly an example of a need that was identified by our team. On the flip side, in terms of planning, looking ahead, the idea of a vehicle or two that would have capacity to tow our trailers and or to store tables and tents and cones and things like that to transport from clinic to clinic is certainly something that we've kind of had in our planning list for a while. When we look at our reserve fund and we look at our plan for replacing vehicles, when should we buy one of those, which is important and supports these clinics, but not as functional for daily use for the sanitarians who are driving out into the field and doing septic inspections. So having an additional allocation to allow us to maintain our plan of vehicle replacement out of our reserve funds that we've been building over the years to support fleet maintenance and replacement, but also buy those vehicles to specifically support the needs of the COVID vaccination clinics came up in our priority list when we're thinking about the opportunity for the additional allocation.
Understood. Thank you so much for answering the question.
Thank you.
Councilor Ryan?
No other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other councilors? Okay, Jen, I would just one comment, one request. When you flesh out your list of needs and approximate funding requirements to meet all of those, I think it would be helpful to the council to see where the funds would be going and what they'd be supporting. So if you could put in kind of a bullet list or a spreadsheet, those items that you just described for us, that would be very helpful.
Sure, we have a spreadsheet prepared. I didn't realize it hadn't been forwarded to you. I'm so sorry about that. So I will send that along.
It may have. I apologize if I skipped over it. So
no worries.
It may be here. And also we appreciate the work that Ledge Light Health District does. We had some conversations in the past and at one point voted to leave the health district and came back because we believe in and we support regionalization. You guys are a great example of that. So we appreciate the work you do and also the fact that you had to step up to a huge catastrophe with little or no funding to support it. So thank you for
Thank
what
you
you
so
do.
much for that.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to, with the concurrence of the members of the committee, move on to new business, as long as we're not breaking any rules here, of Robert's rules. We've had Mike Bronner, Jay Hartling, and Rachel Mosher waiting for us all this time. So I'd like to move on to that. Okay, good. So let me see if I can frame this. So we're on new business item 1, the discussion regarding the process for unbudgeted expenses, as well as the accounting from an auditing standpoint. So there are 2 things we wanted to do. One, we wanted to understand the process for the decision that was made to prepay IT expenses. And by the way, I'm going to stop for a moment. Mr. Butler, you're welcome to stay, but we understand if you've got other things to do. So thank you. And I think looks like Jen has already left. So thank you for coming to talk with us. Okay, so back to, we want to understand the process for making the decision to prepay the IT funds, the IT technology support. And while we certainly appreciate any opportunity to get a discount for prepaying, we want to understand how that decision was made. Specifically, did we follow a process of bringing it to the finance committee? I mean, did the superintendent and the Board of Ed bring it through the finance committee and then to the full Board of Ed to make that decision, because it's a change in the budget? That's the first thing. The second thing, we want to make sure that there's complete understanding all the way around about how to account for those unbudgeted expenses, given that we want to get that discount, we want to prepay, but it was not in the budget. So how do we account for that? Because the auditors will be very interested in that when they come across it. So I'll stop there, and I think I'd like to turn it over to either Mr. Bronner or Mr. Hartling or Rachel, Ms. Mosher, if you'd like to kind of help us through that.
So this is Mr. Bronner. Let me start, and then I will turn it over to Mr. Hartling. So the need to make changes to our IT services and contracts were discussed and briefed by the superintendent and the staff to the Board of Education on the 6th of January. And that action to actually go forth and determine and negotiate a contract for our IT services was voted on by the Board of Education. That was a full board vote on the 6th of January, and that was approved 9-0. And the IT services are something we're always working through. I'll turn it over to Mr. Hartling to talk about how the central office came to this type of contract and why it made sense. But Mr. Hartling was authorized to go forth and negotiate with the vendor and execute a contract and then report back to the board. I do want to note too that that was we executed that contract within our approved budget. So we did not overrun our budget. So it was part of our approved budget. And then the second part is definitely a Ms. Moser discussion as far as the accounting. And I know there's been some discussions on that as well, but I will ask Mr. Hartling to provide some of the background because he did the heavy lifting on this as part of the central office team. So
before you go, Mike, I know you said that it was discussed and voted on and approved, but the reason that the questions came up is there was no indication that any of us could find in the minutes. And if they are in the minutes, I apologize, but I can't see where it was discussed in the meeting minutes that I read.
So they are, yep. So Mr. Bronner here again, Mr. Soms, if you go to, and I just sent a link out this afternoon again, the January 6th meeting, which was a Wednesday, of course, on page 2 under item X10, new business. And that was line item, sub-item A, discussion and possible action on the information technology service.
Okay.
And there was a presentation provided by Mr. Hartling prior to discussion and voting by the full board. So it's on page 2 if you happen to have a hard copy, but it's item 10.
Mr. Soms,
Yeah, yes,
If I
Linda.
may,
Yes.
since I generated the initial email on this, the question has never been whether the going forward with this was never a question. As the town council, if the Board of Ed wants to do this, which is probably maybe an excellent idea, we have no purview over that. That wasn't the question. My question was, how did the board approve? When did the board approve reaching into the surplus to spend $500,000? That was the question. So that even the minutes that you sent, although were very helpful, thank you. They just came today, Bill, so you probably haven't seen them.
No, I haven't. Thank you.
Even the minutes that were sent did not answer my question, which was, when did the board approve taking that much money out of surplus? That was my initial question. Again, never questioning the validity. I'm not sure what I'm at, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah.
It was a good, I'm sure it's a great idea.
Yeah.
But it's the taking it out of surplus, especially since we have some resolutions in regards to that, how that happened. That is the vote I haven't seen.
So that was not a separate vote. That was part of the overall discussions as far as the, again, in that January 6th meeting minutes.
No,
as
I
well
don't
as
think
the
in
March
I don't think in January you discussed, I'm sorry, I'm being rude.
Yeah.
In January, you discussed taking it out of surplus?
No.
Okay,
The
that was
January
like,
discussion was,
What are you listening to?
and the
Town
March
council. Finance was
meeting
canceled.
minutes that
Yeah.
were,
Finance or facilities?
Jay, your mic is open. Go ahead, Mike.
okay. So, no, the January meeting was a discussion on proceeding with the negotiation of that contract. And then I believe it is the March meeting minutes that we provided, that provided financial status and where we were as far as expenditures due to underrunning salaries and things like that due to the reductions during the year because of COVID. And the action that was provided to the superintendent was to go forth and work this contract. And in March, the board was informed, and that discussion as far as our funding status, as you know, each month we receive a status of our expenditures to plan and where we may have potential problems that we have to address or where we have underruns due to certain items. And then that secondary discussion was held at the March Board of Education meeting, and I'll let the superintendent talk to how they got to this particular approach.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Mr. Hartling.
Bill, if I could add something, oh, there's Jay.
Go ahead, Jay.
Sorry. So first, the notion of surplus is not determined until we finish out the fiscal year. So I think we, at least on the Board Ed side, since I've been here 5 years tomorrow, have not operated with the notion of a surplus or a rolling surplus. So I think that may be the nomenclature or the way in which we're discussing it may create some challenges. So the Board of Education, as they've operated, and I feel a little out of place speaking to it, this is Mike or Anthony can talk to it probably better, works within the appropriation provided by town council as Ms. Davis had noted. So throughout the year, there may be expenditures that are incurred by the board within its spending purview or within its allocation that the board or the administration will allocate funds to. So the conversation of surplus is really one that the board doesn't have until almost the end of the fiscal year when we smooth out all our accounts. So, given the fact that the Board of Education works very hard not to come back to the town for funds,
the board may have us utilize funds in different areas to cover expenses related to maybe facilities or other pieces like that. So that's how that's operated. It sounds like the town council has suggestions, and that's more a council to board discussion relative to process that you would suggest or like to see, in which, we're always open to that, but that's not a change in practice. And this is, that's why even the term surplus kind of catches me off guard, because we didn't use that terminology. We don't use that terminology, nor was that how we think about dollars throughout the fiscal year. So that would be helpful if town council has suggestions on process to have that narrative with, the corresponding board members. So maybe that kind of helps shed a little light on things.
Yeah, so I think I can explain where we came up with the concept of surplus. As soon as you pay ahead into a future budgeted year, you're spending money from this year to pay something that comes due next year. Therefore, it's not part of this year's budget, and it has the effect of reducing surplus. In other words, had you not paid ahead, you would have had a larger surplus. And I understand your point, Jay. We do the same thing on our side. We, some accounts overrun, some underrun, and we do transfers all the time. And I know you guys report your transfers between line items, but as soon as you move into the following budget year, I think that changes the situation. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Councilman Sons, but the reality is that isn't practice. Hasn't been practice with the Ledger Board of Education since before I got here. So there's, something else is going on that's raising the question at this point in this particular fiscal year, but that hasn't been practice. And so if we want to talk about practice, rolling forward, certainly I think that's an important conversation between the council and the Board of Education within their purviewed allocated budget, but that hadn't been practiced. So this isn't something new. It's a new conversation, which I, certainly invite any feedback, and I'm sure the board would as well. But this isn't new. In fact, this was something that I was managing through when I took over the district 5 years ago from Kathy, and Kathy managed through from Mike. This isn't new practice, nor is it practice that's not in virtually every district throughout the state. Most notable is when Montville had that huge cut 3 years ago. They used their prepays, if you will, to smooth their budget issues. So, fiscal 21, as well as the prior year, we navigated through the COVID crisis, I think, with the board's support very adeptly to make sure that we were smoothing as much as humanly possible and leveraging every possible federal funding source in the best way for our students and for the taxpayers in Ledyard. So, I mean, if there's a practice discussion and we want to talk about process, I think, certainly the board that I know here on the ed side would be open to that. But again, I don't want to speak for Mike and Anthony and the other board members, but that practice is common in boards of ed throughout the state, and it's not new to the town of Ledyard. I know that, if there's something else I'm missing, because I do work very hard in not getting into, the town side of the budget. If there's something else I'm missing, I'm certainly willing to have dialogue about it. But, we haven't looked at it from a surplus standpoint. And I appreciate your perspective on that, Bill. That's just not how we viewed it. And it's not the feedback I've gotten from the board.
Okay. So I think one thing that caused this to raise as an issue is the dollar amount. It was, it's a huge amount of money. So I think that kind of draws attention to it. Are there other examples of prepayments that you've done in the past that you can think of, Jay or Mike? Prepayments into a future budget year?
As far as having done that in the past, you mean how we've documented it?
Well, no, I mean, Jay just mentioned that this is not a new practice. It's something that the Board of Ed has done.
Yeah, I can keep it simple,
Yeah.
maybe Power School Services, our student information system. It's typically, reoccurring services that are year after year, particularly if we can obtain a discount relative to that prepay. I mean, when we're navigating the budget lines the way we are and trying to come in 2% below or percentage points below what our average wage increase is, leveraging any of those discounts is another factor that we do. And there's a host of those kind of things that we may have leveraged in the past. I'm kind of drawing a blank on some of it. But.
No, that's right. That's another example. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. Marcia, could you speak to the accounting side of this and how this looks to auditors?
Yes. Every year when the auditors are looking at our books, they look very closely at, well, at least the town side, they look very closely at our invoices. And anything that was paid in, say, June or May, if the items that are being paid for are for activities or items that are used after July 1st, we are required to show those as prepaid expenses. And they're very picky about that. And so I talked to our auditor about this, and he said, because there are, I think, 16 months worth of IT services that were paid from last year's budget. He said that is a prepaid item and it needs to be expensed in the years in which those services are being used.
Did you chat with, I'm sorry, Marcia, not really being cued in. Did you have a conversation with Rachel so you truly understood what those invoices were, or was that based on what you're believing? All right, I want to phrase this like, did you get this from Rachel and then follow up with the auditors to have that conversation? Or because we also have conversations with the auditors. So I think if I guess rephrase that, I want to make sure we're all aligned in the conversations we're having with auditors, because you and I both know, depending on how the issue is presented or framed, the auditors may give you a different view of it. So I didn't know, did you have that with Rachel?
I did not. I had a follow-up email with Rachel, but before I saw the invoices that show that $500,000 was paid in advance for the months were itemized, starting with July 2021 and going through whatever 16 months is so that would be into November of 2022. October. So no, I did not talk to Rachel about that. I sent her an email, assuming after I had the conversation with the auditor, just trying to be helpful about how that would be expensed or how that would be reported in the financial software.
So Marcia, where should we go from here?
I agree with Jay. I think that's a decision that the two finance boards need to discuss. I know that every year there are a lot of things that are prepaid, and like you said, it's usually a much smaller amount. Supplies, maybe some books, things like that. I know all school districts do it. I think that it doesn't make sense that the town has to follow generally accepted accounting practices, and we don't hold the Board of Ed or boards of ed in the state to the same requirement. So, but I think ultimately that's something that is probably an ongoing conversation. The auditors will be here next week, starting Monday. I think, Bill, maybe, you talking to them while they're here if you have a chance, and maybe Mike.
So maybe that's one of those things where we get to actually ask them for advice, and they give us advice and they tell us how we ought to be handling it.
Yeah. I know that the partner, Nicoletta, is here, I think, on Wednesday afternoon.
I would just ask, one of the things that unfortunately I think has been a victim of COVID virtual and all the other things is I'd like to have that be a collaborative process and not an email after the fact. And I know we're all incredibly busy, but I do think I agree with Marcia 100% about, the two finance committees collaborating and I know, Bill, you're open to that. And I know Mike is collaborating and discussing these things. I think we're losing some of that connected with regards to how we're working together because, listen, we're, and I know some will cringe, but we're, one of the lowest funded school districts in the state. We've had an infusion of federal dollars and we've really worked hard to smooth and prevent the town from having large budget increases because of the pressures that I know you all feel from taxpayers, while at the same time trying to build a level of support and a system that our students are well served by. So, I mean, this is a bigger picture than, a conversation with the auditors. This is fundamental. And I know, Bill, you acknowledged that during the discussion of the budget. I mean, at some point, we do have to have some pretty hard conversations about how we want to fund our school system. And then how do we kind of float some of these things? Yeah. And, I see, there are issues on both sides of government that I think we could work together and collaborate on in a really positive and meaningful way. And I'd like to be part of that. I think COVID has kind of set us back a little bit because we were really humming along there for the first few years.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're having this meeting and invited you, because we can't have this discussion by email. It was starting to go in that direction, and Linda pointed out to us all that we need to sit down and talk about this. So I think that's our intent, Jay. And also, the reason it's a particular concern, in addition to the accounting, is we're really squeezing a balloon here. And when we start to think there's going to be a surplus, and we know that the surplus, at least from the Board of Ed side, goes toward Board of Ed capital, and we know that we're underfunding capital, I get concerned. I've been concerned for a number of years, and I keep asking about how we fund our school buildings and our infrastructure from a capital perspective, because
Bill, I deeply appreciate that sentiment, but that actually, whether the Board of Ed reserve at the end of the fiscal year goes into the BNR, the CNR fund for the board, hasn't actually been a given. And I know I've talked to you about that in the past.
Yep.
But I think that again is another area we could discuss and strengthen our connection. And build that collaborative effort.
Yeah. I agree. Again, we're squeezing a balloon. So,
hey, Bill, this is Tim.
Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, no, I was just hoping to redirect the conversation back on the agenda item so that we could talk, instead of talking generalisms right now, maybe we could talk specifically about the agenda item.
So I think we're doing that, Tim.
I agree.
The only thing we haven't spent a lot of time on is the auditing and the accounting for how we account for prepaying the IT expense.
Right. So, I mean, and that's kind of where I wanted to stick with. I mean, I understand some of the concerns being voiced right now. Just in the interest of everybody's time, was just wanted to focus more on the specific agenda item and the specific $500,000 expenditure. Understanding, because I do appreciate it, that it has root in a lot of practices and general practices that we've been discussing, and those do need to be addressed. But I'm not sure we're going to engineer an enterprise solution in one meeting. So
no, we're not. But I think our next step is to talk to the auditors, and per Jay's request, I think I would like to invite Rachel Mulger and Mike Bronner and Jay if he wants to attend. But we need to make sure that we account for these expenditures correctly from an auditing standpoint. And they are very helpful in getting us where we need to be from a procedural standpoint.
The Bronner here. The other thing, Mr. Soms, you and I should do is we hold joint finance meetings during the budget development time. We should look at maybe having even quarterly during the rest of the year, where these types of topics, if they're coming up, we get a chance to actually work them collaboratively rather than after the fact. And that's just a matter of making more time in our collective schedules. But I think that puts it on our calendars to make sure we're doing those things, not just things by email because everyone's busy.
Yeah, I think we can do that. It's a good idea, Mike. For now, I think the immediate next step is to have this group that's been discussing the question, if we bring in the auditors to get their view on it and tell us how to account for it. Again, I'm not so concerned that we're trying to save money. That's a great thing. But we have to make sure that we follow it from a process, a procedural point of view, as well as an auditing point of view. So I think that's the immediate next step. Would anybody disagree with that?
No, but if I might just add one final comment. My initial question was simply, when did the Board of Ed approve spending $500,000 to prepay out of surplus? And I still haven't seen where the Board of Ed voted to make that specific expenditure.
Crickets.
So if anybody's trying to talk, you're mute. I will speak to that, and I'm just going to throw a straw man out there. I'm going to say maybe that was a slip. Maybe they voted to spend the money, but it didn't understand where it was coming from. And if I'm wrong, maybe somebody will correct me. Okay, so I'm going to move on unless anyone has any final comments. Okay, hearing none. Mr. Hartling and Ms. Mosier and Mr. Bronner and also Mr. Favory, thank you very much for attending. We will continue this discussion and hopefully we'll get this right too, like we do many other things. So thank you for your time. We'll be back in touch. Okay. So I'm going to go back to item 2 under old business and ask the mayor if he wants to say anything more about the items on his spreadsheet that he's been keeping and shared with us. And I should ask, has anyone seen this spreadsheet that I'm talking about? I didn't look to see if you guys were all copied, but it's a merger of some of the ideas or projects we've been keeping, as well as some new ideas that the mayor's been tracking for us. So did you guys see that spreadsheet?
Is it linked in the agenda? I've seen everything that's in the agenda.
Yes, I think it is in the agenda.
Okay.
Is that the, I'm sorry, Roxanne, is that the spreadsheet that you're referencing? Is that the one that lists the items by description? And then there's a third column that seems cut off onto a second page where it talks about the percentage or what portion of the funding it wants, that specific line item?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think, and that the mayor sent and I attached it.
Okay, just making sure it's the same one. All right.
So Roxanne, are you able to share that so we're all looking at the same thing and the mayor can use it as a guide?
Sure. Yep. Give me just 1 minute to pull it up.
Okay.
In the agenda, it's the ARPA funded project options.
Yep.
Okay, I have it.
I have it in my hand too, Rox, so you don't have to pull it up if you don't want.
Okay.
I've got old school paper.
Bill, do you need me to pull it up for you?
No, I'm looking. I have my copy. I'm looking at it.
Okay. All right. So
good.
if you're good, I'll just get started on it. So I'll start with the bigger items, and you're going to see a couple. And I actually edited it a little bit further today. The sewer line extension based on the Weston and Sampson preliminary project report that's coming back. They kind of broke it up into a couple different phases. So I changed the top line number to 1.2 million. I think it previously read 2 million. The 1.2 million is one leg of this project, what they're calling the first phase, which runs from the Bill Library to the high school. So that stretch was one spot. The WPCA is in discussions with Weston and Sampson because apparently there is money through DECD that could fund a very large portion of that piece of the project. So a lot of that 1.2 could be freed up pretty quickly. So they are pursuing that. I did caution Weston and Sampson that we have a timeline to meet with our LOTSIP grant, the multi-use path to go from the same spot to the same spot. So I said, what we don't want to have happen is we do our multi-use path and then they come along behind us and tear things up to put in a sewer line.
Yeah.
So that the engineer understood that and said that it will be a tight timeline, but the grant has to be in and they will approve grants over the winter so that we should be ready to go to kind of work these concurrently. The next item was the town hall AC replacement. I think we mentioned that briefly last time, and that the air conditioning system has failed in town hall. We are using window units now, but it was previously grant funded, and unfortunately the grant funding provided for the bare minimum. So we got the cheapest system possible. And it is exactly 10 years old and the systems are failing now. So I put that on there as an option to do. I'm not going to cover the COG one unless you want me to. The Southeastern Connecticut Cultural Coalition, this is a group that works, comes in to and takes part in the COG meetings. They're asking for 1% of the county share as well. The only thing I would caution you on that is at our COG meeting today, what they said was that they would collect the 1% county share and then redistribute that same money directly back into your municipality. So I'm not supremely confident that we would write a check to somebody to have them just write the check back to the arts, whatever they are, in the town of Ledyard. So I'm really on the fence about that one. Ledgelight, you heard their presentation tonight. I would also let you know that Ledgelight did get increased state funding this year. So on the per capita basis, the Council of Governments submitted a letter to the governor, and they did increase their per capita. I can't remember what the per capita increase was, but it was fairly substantial. Concrete floor in the pole barn at the lower town green. We have projected about a $55,000 bill on this. We have had 4 to 6 complaints at this point. Maybe not necessarily complaints, but concerns coming from residents and visitors that are either wheelchair bound or they have children in strollers, and pushing them through the asphalt millings underneath the pole barn is hugely problematic. So I have concerns that if we don't have a legitimate service down there, that if we get a real ADA complaint, we're going to have a problem down there. So I thought that might be a good project. It would also add really good utility to that building. Solar charging station, this came up by way of Public Works, and they are these almost look like little picnic tables, little octagonal picnic tables, but the top is solar, and then there are USB ports on the sides of this device that would be secured to the ground, and it would provide for charging of cell phones and whatever else plugs in with the USB. So just an interesting idea. The ClearGov modules, there are a couple added modules for SIP budgeting that would also increase budget transparency. Marcia can add more. She actually took part in a webinar on that. So if you want more detail on that, she can provide that. The solar powered crosswalk signs, we put in a request to the state of Connecticut DOT. We've seen a number of people, and with the parallel parking on the street, which is positive and helpful, the negative is that you sometimes get people stepping out from behind cars and into a crosswalk, and they're not necessarily seen. And then the other aspect of it is people don't exactly stop when somebody is standing to cross a crosswalk. So we put in a request to the state DOT sometime back to see if they would be willing to do a pilot program for us, and they turned us down. But the idea was they would be these solar powered crosswalk signs where you get over to it, you press the button and the lights flash on the crosswalk sign, almost strobing to the point where it really gets people's attention. They're used in a lot of different states. I haven't seen them used so much here, but I thought it would be an interesting idea to help protect pedestrians. Vinyl siding the food pantry building. That building was built, I believe, just over 20 years ago. It was kind of an early generation vinyl siding. The vinyl is failing at this point. It was probably a first or second generation vinyl, so it's getting very brittle at this point. So we thought that might be a good long-term project, because vinyl now today is 30 to 50 years. Installing Wi-Fi at the pantry and the town green, I thought this could be a plus. It will help the food pantry for sure, because there is a lack of service down there. But I was thinking that we could put the internet in the pantry and then do a range extender up in a higher part of the Holdridge Pavilion on the upper town green that would be protected from the elements, but again, provide open Wi-Fi on the town green for those that are there utilizing it. And I think that would be a plus. There are a number of doors. We have doors in the town hall that the bottom 6 to 12 inches are rusted out and they look atrocious. You know, you come in the front of the town hall right now, it doesn't look good. The door on the east end by Roxanne's office looks horrific too. These are doors that were sheet metal doors, and the salt or the ice melt has corroded them very badly. And I think it would be a big improvement. The other piece of that improvement that we're looking at was 1 or 2 electronic locking systems on the front door and the side doors of the town hall. And I can explain more about why that is to lock and unlock the building. But the other one was sidewalk backfill. So Ledyard Center, we have sidewalks that run down to the corner of 214 and 117. But in front of that frontier parcel, it stops and there's no sidewalk between the edge of that across in front of Holdridge's and where it picks up at the building next to Town Hall. There's also a 2 pieces across the street that are missing. So this is just a backfill project that would actually complete the sidewalks in Ledyard Center. And then the remaining piece is down as you head past Valentino's heading south on Route 117. But that remaining piece is part of the lot SIP project. So that one would be picked up by the lot SIP grant and be grant funded. Sandy Hollow guardrails. This has come up several times in the past. Senator Austin and Representative Conley have made attempts to get funding through the state for this. There were, actually, I think there was just one specific complaint about the lack of quality guardrails down on as you enter the flats across Sandy Hollow Road at either end. They're the old creosoted posts with the woven wire. They're probably 90% failed. I did look into with the chief of police how many accidents we've had. And I guess the concern was that cars could enter the reservoir there and contaminate the reservoir. We had 1 vehicle that left the roadway and entered the reservoir in the last 10 years. So It's not pressing, but again, we're not going to get state funding for it. We also asked Groton Utilities about it, and they said, you know, basically your property, your problem. So that project was on here. The housing rehab grant program, the state did not fund that, but we currently have 17 people on a waiting list for the housing rehab program. And we don't have funding for it. We just recovered some funding. We had a resident that sold their home recently, and we were able to recover about $6,000. So it's a 0% loan, but if they sell or refinance or otherwise transfer the property, we get paid. And so that one did pay off. But the reality of it is that kind of money probably just pays for one furnace or boiler replacement if we need. So I still need to do some research to make sure that we could use this ARPA funding for such a program. But there are those that think that it is permitted. So I just want a definitive answer on that. And then the Parks and Rec summer scholarships, we used them up this summer. And we ran out of money, which I guess is a good thing because we used up the money that was there and distributed scholarships for lower income families in town. But I thought that might be helpful to the residents to provide a boost for that for next year. Then I broke out the sewer line extension. So in the sewer use study from Weston and Sampson, they did not contemplate putting a sewer line in Ledyard Center running from the post office down to the Bill Library. And I think we would be remiss not to include a public sewer line in front of the primary commercial node in Ledyard Center. So that number, which was mildly extrapolated at $612,500. That was based on the $250 a linear foot that Weston and Sampson used times the 2,450 linear feet that runs from the Route 214 117 intersection to the Colonel Ledyard and 117 intersection. And then the last aspect of that sewer line extension, which does not include the Fairway Drive, Colby Drive area, that was contemplated to be paid for by the developers and or the property owners on Fairway and Colby. But I also included the $950,000, which would be the final phase of the sewer extension, which provides we have a 3-inch line in the ground right now. It's grossly undersized going from the high school to Pennywise. The good news was the line doesn't have to run all the way to the wastewater treatment plant. That was not the 3-inch line. The 3-inch line was only from the high school to Pennywise. So the final phase of this would be upgrading that 3-inch line to a 6-inch pressurized main. So at that point, we felt like we had pretty good coverage as best we could with the sewer project and still being within the confines of what our plant can accommodate or can support in the way of wastewater. So we're certainly welcome to add projects to this list. That list as it now stands is $3,427,068. And our total funds allotted to Ledyard is $4,327,000. So we still have just under $1 million to spend on the ARPA funds.
Just buy a bridge.
Well, Steve and I talked about the bridge, but the infrastructure bill that is currently through, I think it's through the Senate and heading to the House next.
I think it's being argued in the House right now.
Yeah. So that one, if the infrastructure bill passes, it does include monies for roads and bridges. And two of the things that Steve and I have discussed are that specific bridge, the Lantern Hill Road Bridge, or the Whitford Brook Bridge, and Lantern Hill Road itself. So that would be actually federally funded, so it wouldn't even be part of the infrastructure bill, but that's where we are with those.
Yeah, I'm just being facetious, and I'm
No, it's-
suggesting we put a water line on that bridge and then we'll say it's a water line project.
Exactly.
I'm just kidding. I don't mean it.
Nope. I understand. So those are the things we've kind of roughly come up with. We don't have to spend all the money right now. We have until December 31st of 24 to designate. So we have to make clear what our spending plans will be by that date. And we still have 2 years beyond that date to actually expend the funds. So it's not to say that we have to spend it all right now, because we don't. And in reality, we don't have it all. We literally only have half of it. We received half of it right around July 1st, a little bit earlier than that, actually. But we don't have enough to cover all of these projects right now, but these are not all immediate projects.
All right, we'll keep this on the agenda. This is really helpful and some
Okay,
really
sure.
great
Absolutely.
ideas, Fred. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's move on to item
Bill,
You want to back
yeah,
the finance director report?
I'm sorry, to the what? Oh, the finance directors. I'm sorry, Marcia. Jeez.
Bill, can I ask a question real quick?
Yes,
'Cause
Linda.
I have to run.
Okay.
What is the process, Mayor? I saw that Stonington, I believe it was Stonington, actually was sending their list to a town meeting. Do we know what the process is at this time?
What they have said for direction, which is very open-ended, is use whatever process your town or your charter dictates for expenditures. So as an example, North Stonington, which is an unchartered municipality, they are going to town meeting on every single item that they're going to spend, because that's what they require. Other towns are approving it by city council or town council. The city of Norwich held like a public hearing to discuss, here are the projects that we are putting forward. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think one of the things, in a town meeting format, I think what you're going to get is you're going to get some people that like this and other people that like that, and some people that don't like this and some people that don't like that. And I think it could be a little more challenging than it needs to be. And that's not to say that we wouldn't be open and transparent about the spending. And I think we can support every one of these ideas as being positive for the residents of our town, whether it's a long-term sewer investment or something as simple as being able to get around if you're at the town green or at the farmer's market. So going back to your initial question, I think it's based upon the town and how they typically expend dollars.
So Linda, I'm glad you asked that question, because when Fred was talking about putting a floor in the VOAG barn, it occurred to me that this is a list of things that are not on our capital improvement plan. And we just denied 2 projects to the Board of Ed that were not on their capital improvement plan. So I do think we need to tie these to either our capital improvement plan or say this is an emergency. And the floor in that barn is a good example. I'd say it's not in the plan, but we have a major liability with the current state in the VOAG barn. So I think so another example, Sandy Hollow guardrails have been on the capital plan for years. So if we identify the things that are not already on the capital plan, and some we can say, it's a minor thing like Wi-Fi in the pantry, $2,500. It doesn't need to be capital. But something else that we're spending money on, especially if it's a large amount of money, we should provide the justification. So for example, a sewer line extension, these funds can only be used for certain things. Therefore, we're spending it on a sewer line extension in keeping with the ARPA guidelines. So I think we need to put that kind of documentation together for each one of these. And if we can't make it fit, then I think maybe we have to say, okay, we're not gonna do it.
Yeah, that can work. I think one of the slight differences between this and our capital plan is that this is a one-time inject from the federal government,
Yep.
as opposed to our capital plan or in the case of the high school where the remaining funds that were drawn from our reserves just return there.
Yeah. Yep. And I think we should look at the capital plan and see if there's something we missed that we haven't funded that is there that we should. So
Definitely.
good discussion. Thank you, Linda. Okay, Marcia.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, the audit starts next week, and we are in the best shape, I think, process-wise, than we have been in the whole time I've been here, in fact. I had Rachel at the Board of Ed was very receptive to the deadlines this year for getting things done so we could get the information over to the auditors for the trial balances for them to be able to make their selections before they get here on Monday. And my staff just worked their bodies off getting ready. So I'm very grateful to everybody who helped with that. They will be here for 2 weeks. Roxanne has made sure they have a home in the council chambers for that time. And anybody can walk in at any time and talk to them if you need to. I know I'm going to for the whole 2 weeks. That's it for the audit. I did want to let you know, the mayor mentioned the ClearGov additional modules that we have access to for some additional money. I'm sorry to see Linda left because one of the things that we can do with one of the modules is have a very transparent look at our expenses on a monthly basis. We can upload all of our payments and the public could get a better sense of what their money is being spent on. And through the enhanced operating budget module, they can actually see the budget to actual information. And we can actually have the department heads enter the information in the budget module instead of going through Munis. And then at the end of the budget process, when the budget has been approved, we can just upload that into Munis. It's very user-friendly, very visual, like the original ClearGov that we used this year is. And the capital plan has, it's just visually quite stunning the way it shows you from the beginning of a project with the funding request all the way through the project. So if you think about the school project, it would just be transparent to anybody who wants to find out. And I'm thinking of a particular resident who likes to know all the information about the school project. He'll just be able to go in and sign in and all the information will be there. So it's for an additional $10,000 over what we're paying now.
Wow.
I think it's a really good thing for us to do going forward.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Yeah, I just missed the amount. That's incredibly low. Thank you. How would it handle something like take any payment that we make once a year, and you're 9 months through the year, the item is funded and there's $0 spent? How would ClearGov present that?
I don't know that specific answer, but I think it would probably show some kind of spread throughout the year of that budgeted amount. We know we're going to need to spend this, but we don't get billed until May.
Yep.
It might show a monthly amount. There's a lot of flexibility on the part of the user.
That would be great because we're going to get more questions than we
Yeah.
can answer
Yeah,
if it doesn't.
Right.
So, right. Okay. Thank you, Marcia. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the tax refunds. Is anybody willing to make a motion?
Mhm. Oh,
Go ahead.
Tim, you gonna take it?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
So I move to recommend the town council approve 2 tax refunds in the combined total amount of $5,749.40, with each exceeding $22,400 in accordance with tax collector departmental procedures.
Is there a second?
Counselor Ingalls second. I don't know if Tim, if it's $2,400. I don't know if it's reading different on yours.
Yeah, he corrected. He said 2,400.
Oh, he did correct? Okay,
Yep.
sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. I started to say it wrong and then I corrected myself.
Okay, got it. Second.
Okay, so one, there was an accounting problem with the escrow company. They paid it twice because something didn't post right. And the second was the escrow company paid and the owner paid. So both look good.
Mhm.
Any questions, comments?
No.
All in favor, please say aye.
Counselor Ingalls votes aye.
Councilor Ryan votes aye.
Counselor Solomon votes aye and the motion passes. Thank you very much. Is there any other new business or old business or other things I forgot?
No, Bill,
Okay.
we are done. We are so done.
Yeah, that was a way longer meeting than I thought it was going to be.
It was long.
Yeah. All right. Anybody want to move to adjourn?
So
That's all
moved.
you, Andrea.
Yeah. We are adjourned without exception. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank
right.
you.
Thank
Everybody, I'll see some of you tomorrow.